Hello everyone, my name is Carrie, my pronouns are she, her. I am trans, and if that bothers you, this is not the series for you. Alright, now that all the bigots are gone, we can continue. Today I have a very special video for you all. I've wanted to record a gameplay series for quite some time, and recently I finally settled on doing a playthrough of Kerbal Space Program. Now, I will preface this by saying I'm not very good at the game. I just know the very basics, and it's been a few years since I've really gotten into it. I've never played with the DLCs, which I now have, but I'm sure I'll learn a lot over time. So, I want to do something of a completionist run. Obviously, KSP being a sandbox game doesn't really have any goals or even like Steam achievements built into it, but I've got a couple goals in mind that we want to work towards. So my first goal is I want to unlock the entire tech tree. Pretty straightforward, self-explanatory, but this is going to take us at least a few episodes. And I hope you don't mind I explain this series while we make our first rocket in the background. It's all the parts that anyone ever starts off with. But our second goal is going to be to land on every single celestial body in the game. Every planet, moon, dwarf planet, besides Jewel because it's a gas giant. But seeing as how I've never even gone past the Mun and Minmus, this should be quite the challenge for me. So here we've got our first craft. Its goal is to go up, and I do believe it will do that quite successfully. If you're unfamiliar with Kerbal Space Program, basically you build rockets with parts. And in science mode, which is what we were playing, you only start out with so many parts, and you have to unlock them over time by collecting science, by conducting experiments, and basically the further you get from your home planet, Kerbin, the more science you get. So here we are running some experiments just on the launch pad. Do a little EVA report on the launch pad. We get back in, and we go up. Not a very exciting mission. So I will explain our third goal, a stretch goal if you will. If we can land on every single body, I would like to land at every single biome on every single body. This would be pretty challenging. I'm sure some people have done it. I've never really seen a series dedicated to it, but I think it'd be pretty fun. Definitely difficult, seeing as some of the bodies have biomes in the double digits. There I go, just darting down there. He gets out a bit precariously, perhaps, to get a little EVA report from flying. Then I reset some of the experiments and take them again because we are now landed at the vehicle assembly building, which counts as a separate mini biome. So that was our first rocket. So we go back to the hangar. We get some science first, my bad. We're going to get some of the first liquid fuel tanks, which you can actually throttle and control, as opposed to the solid rocket boosters, which are either all or nothing. So here you can see me build the first liquid fuel rocket, and since the first craft, the Genesis 1, was quite successful at its goal of going up, the Genesis 2, as I will christen it, is going to go more up, to space even. Now, what counts as space exactly? Well, here on Earth, the generally agreed upon definition is 100 kilometers above the surface. Obviously, it's kind of arbitrary, because it's not like there's a real line that just, separates the atmosphere from outer space. But as like a legal definition, it's been generally agreed upon that 100 kilometers is the line that separates our atmosphere from space, also called the Kármán line. Now, in Kerbal Space Program, everything is scaled down, so the line between the atmosphere of Kerbin and space is just 70 kilometers. Here you can see me put Valentina Kerman in the cockpit, because we are a feminist space program here. Valentina, of course, is a reference to the first real woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, who was with the Soviet space program, and is actually still alive to this day, and she serves in the Russian Duma. I'm not sure how much democracy they actually do over there. I would suspect not a lot, but it is pretty fascinating that such a historical figure is still kicking it. Here we've got our second rocket, the Genesis 2, taking off. I decided to color it dark just to give it a little bit of visual interest. Why not? I don't want all the rockets to look exactly the same. We're going to turn to the right a bit, and the reason why is because Kerbin, just like Earth, rotates in this direction. So whenever we take off with the rotation of the planet, we actually gain a bit of speed because we're not fighting against its rotation. Here you can see our apoapsis, which is the furthest point from the surface of the body we're orbiting, is about 250 kilometers. So now that we're above 70 kilometers, I have Valentina get out, do some science, get some goo. We have a thermometer, a barometer. I don't know what they're measuring, given that you can't really measure temperature in space, and there's no atmospheric pressure, given that it's a vacuum, but they are giving us science points. So as Valentina collects all the experiments, looks like I must have had an extra there, so I had me dump it. But here we are. I do like the background music in the game that comes on when you get to space. Here I just hide the UI so we can maybe get some potential thumbnail screenshots. I always thought it was quite calming. As soon as you get to space, it starts doing this grand, I don't know what genre you'd call it, I guess opera kind of music. Or it sounds maybe like a Hans Zimmer kind of thing, which I guess maybe I associate with Interstellar, so it would be appropriate. So here we separate from the rocket as we are going to come back down. This is going to be our first re-entry into Kerbin. Here I just time warp a little bit and speed things up. And here we start seeing the re-entry effects. I do have a couple visual mods installed, purely visual mods as far as I know. But this one here is called Firefly, and it actually completely overhauls the re-entry effects of getting into an atmosphere. I just think it looks pretty nice. Now we're going to deploy the parachute as we safely drift back down to the surface. Try to do a couple more science experiments just in case we're over a different biome, and for some of them it appears we are, so we do get a little bit of extra science for that. Our other rocket parts crash, and we splash down. Another successful mission. Here I do a couple more experiments just because we are now splashed down in the water, which counts as its own biome, so we get more science points. And now we can recover our vessel. Here I go to the tech tree, and I'm just going to unlock some more science experiments because, honestly, it's an investment. You know, we spend science to unlock it now, we get more experiments, which then gets us more science, and on, almost exponentially. And then I look at a couple more things, different kinds of liquid fuel, engines, decorative parts, and now we go back to the vehicle assembly building. And I start my work on Genesis 3. So the goal of this one is to reach space high above Kerbin, because that does count as its own kind of, not quite biome, but space high above and space near to a celestial body count as a separate status each. So if we reach space high above Kerbin, then it gets us a bit more science from our experiments as opposed to space low near Kerbin. Here you see I'm actually going way overkill because I planned on using our second smaller stage up top to circularize an orbit maybe, but, well, I'll just let you see what happens when you put too much mass and not enough thrust. I conduct a couple experiments on the launch pad because we haven't done that one here yet. I get back in, and we have liftoff, just barely. So this is what happens when you have just entirely too much mass for the engine that's trying to lift this thing. And Jeb here ends up kind of just barely scooting off the launch pad. So I decide to abort this because obviously this is not going to reach space, let alone space high above. I quickly stage, Jeb hits the parachute, and he, just barely manages to splash down safely just offshore as that little rocket booster flies off into the distance. I mean, I will take what I can get, at least he is alive, and I'll take this opportunity to conduct a couple more experiments from the shores biome of Kerbin. So we go back, I go to the tracking station, and I clean up our debris here, just to see if there is any. For some reason I can't clean up this one, and I figure it's because it's probably moving. I think it was that rocket booster that was still going, and sure enough, there it is. Now that it has no control, we can recover it. Now I go back to the VAB once again, and we're going to try to refine Genesis 3 so it can actually achieve its goal. So I decide, you know what, we got to reduce mass. As a car person, I know that as far as physics is concerned, weight reduction and power addition are the same thing. So we decide to just take some of the mass off. And I decide, 2 stages, it's overkill. We don't need that. We're not going to circularize an orbit. We just have to get to space high above. That's over 250 kilometers. So here we are in the much more successful launch of the now refined Genesis 3. And once again, we do our gravity turn, just that we're going along with Kerbin's rotation and not trying to fight against it. Now, of course, if we were being very realistic about it, we would probably send up probes before we did any manned missions, but honestly, this is a game. What's the fun in that? We want to be able to send up our little green guys. So here we go. You can see me just checking the map to make sure our apoapsis gets to over 250 kilometers. Here we do crew reports, we do our goo experiments, our thermometer and barometer, which, once again, we're in space, but hey, we get science for it, so I guess I'm not complaining. The game decided that it is important data that space is a vacuum, because I guess this is a revolutionary discovery. So here we reach apoapsis, and I burn prograde just a bit because I don't want our descent to be so steep. Because the steeper your descent is, the higher your risk of burning up in the atmosphere. We're probably going to be fine either way, but I just wanted to make sure since we had a little bit of extra fuel in there before we ditch it. Alright, and now I time warp us back inside the atmosphere. I hide the UI just so we can see these beautiful re-entry effects provided by the Firefly mod. Almost like a comet. Here we see our rocket burning up in front of us as it crashes. We approach the cloud layer, which KSP does not have clouds by default, but there are a lot of visual mods made in the last few years and really perfected that enhance the look of the game by miles and miles. The real Kerbal Space Program 2 was the mods for KSP 1 we got along the way. I promise I won't mention KSP 2 again. That was a disaster, and I don't want to remind you of that traumatic memory. So here we are, and I look at some of the parts we can unlock, and I really want to get the better landing struts because the ones you start off with are extremely tiny and flimsy, and I just really don't trust my skills to build a lander that doesn't break them. So here you can see I look around some of the different tanks, science experiments, but we don't end up getting the landing struts that I wanted. So my next mission was initially going to be a lander. However, I decided because we're not going to do that, I'm instead going to follow in the footsteps of NASA and do a flyby of the Mun. Well, they did the moon, but, same thing. So here I am, just getting a little cargo bay to make it a bit more aerodynamic. I store the experiments in there. So in doing a flyby of a body, obviously we won't get to do the fun, most exciting part, which is landing on it, but we will still get a lot of science by getting both space near and space high above. And now I get us this little stage I was trying to do last time, but it should go much better this time because I will provide more thrust in the beginning. So that little stage on top should get us on a good flyby and then get us back. And now you can see on the bottom, I'm actually making 3 kind of identical constructions. So in the middle, we've got obviously the main one, and then we've got these liquid rocket boosters on the outside. You can see me looking for the parts. But the idea is here, obviously, we're just going to have 3 times the thrust. And the pièce de résistance of this design is the fuel lines. So you can see those little yellow lines I've connected from the boosters to the main booster. And what that's going to do is the liquid rocket boosters are going to feed their fuel into the middle, as you can see in the bottom left as the fuel gauges go down. So what we can do is we can make sure the middle one lasts longer. Now we chuck off those side ones to reduce our mass because they're useless to us now. And we've gotten pretty damn high up. Now I'm just going to burn towards the horizon so that I can try and circularize an orbit. And once we see a periapsis, you'll know we're on our way, and it gets above 70 kilometers. Now, I actually burn off a little bit so it's a little in the atmosphere because I don't want to leave any junk floating around in space. This is a problem in real life. So you can see I burn backwards a little to get that main booster to just stay in the atmosphere. Now you can see me playing around with the maneuver node because I want to get us on a good flyby of the Mun that's going to include space near to it. I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but I know that it's a pretty small body with a pretty small gravitational field, so I'm cutting it pretty close, or at least I'm trying to. Here we are doing that burn to insert us on a flyby of the Mun. And now I slow it down a little bit just so I can fine tune it, and we end up getting a periapsis of 28 kilometers, which I was pretty sure would be space near to. Now I just time warp till we get over there. We are now in its sphere of influence. So you can see in the top right, I have a little readout that says situation in space high. This is a little visual mod that I have that just gives us information about biomes and our current situation in terms of experiments. This is stuff that you can access just from the wiki, but I find it very helpful to just have it displayed right there in a little menu. Now you can see we get to space low above the Mun, and I conduct the same experiments, get more and more science. I then want to collect them all and put them all back in the capsule. I'm sure the next time that we fly this close to the Mun, we will be landing on it, but unfortunately not this time. So as we say goodbye to it, we come back into the sphere of influence of Kerbin. And all we're going to do is when we reach our apoapsis, we're simply going to burn retrograde. And this should be extremely efficient because the apoapsis is the most efficient point at which to burn to bring down your periapsis. So we bring it down to inside the atmosphere, we re-enter. I turn the UI off because I think it looks really pretty. And we've basically done the goal of the first Apollo missions, which was to simply do a flyby of the moon. Not nearly as exciting as landing on it, but we do have lots of science, and I will be sure that the first thing we do on our next rocket is to land on a foreign body. Now I'm just looking at the tech tree to see what I want to use for our next mission, which will be next episode. I know not a lot happened here, but this is just a baseline, a little bit of an introduction to the series. I promise you there will be more interesting and exciting missions to come. But for now, that is all. For the next episode, we will be constructing our first lander, and we will actually be landing on Minimus, not the Mun. And I will explain that next episode when we get around to it. But for now, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to click the like button if you liked the video, and subscribe if you want to see more, or I will put you on our next rocket and crash you directly into the ocean. Your choice. See you next time.